Few people would pay serious attention to these predictions if it weren't for Clarke's track record as a man who seems to have the ability to foresee the future. His fiction has, after all, foreshadowed a string of real-life inventions like video phones, email, the space shuttle, laptop computers, and cloning.
Clarke doesn't have a lab. I've never known him to do any lab work. I think his lab is up here. You know, he has a way of thinking about things that just breaks them open, you know, like so many eggs. I think that when the history books are written, Clarke will emerge as one of the greatest visionaries of the 20th century.
Nobody knows the future. That's the key thing, because the future is not inevitable. It is made to a considerable degree by human beings, and chance plays a role. Nevertheless, it is possible to see patterns that others haven't seen. And I think that that is certainly something that Arthur Clarke has done.
This is a sign of person that the world needs a lot more of. We have incredible numbers of specialists, and yet how many people do we have that are synthesizing this knowledge and visioning the future?
As far as the future is concerned, any political, sociological prediction is utterly impossible. Look at what's happened in the last 10, 20 years. The only thing you can do about predicting the future, the only area where there's any possibility of success is in the technological future.
Throughout his life, Clarke has used his science fiction imagination as a lever on the real world, thinking the unthinkable. As when, some 50 years ago, he was responsible for revolutionizing modern communications.
Towards the end of the war, I got this idea of using satellites as relay stations. British television started just before the war and was stopped, of course, when the war began. So I'd seen some television and realized, of course, that the range of ground-based transmitters was very limited because of the curvature of the Earth. So obviously, the higher you could get, the better. If you could get right out into space, you could cover half the Earth in one go. And there was this particular 24-hour orbit, and the satellite at that height, at that particular distance, would stay fixed over the same spot on the Earth. So I wrote this up in a short article, and that's where the whole thing started. And sometimes I feel like the late Dr. Frankenstein.
He had this visionary sense of what satellites would be able to do. Even in the 60s, he anticipated a world where satellites would make the withholding of information impossible because anyone with a laptop computer would be able to just beam in their stories. And he wrote this at a time where the smallest computers were things that were about the size of this hotel.
I was rereading the article the other day, and it's interesting to see what I got right and what I got wrong. I didn't think it would happen as quickly as it did, but everything I said has happened.
Now, years later, communication satellites fly through space in what is known as the Clarke orbit, and the satellite barons like Rupert Murdoch and Ted Turner still consult with the man who made their business possible in the first place.
On the whole, of course, the benefits are enormous, but sometimes I do see some of the violent, horrible programs, fictional programs, I do feel rather disgusted. But on the other hand, when we see what is really happening in the world, we've got to know what is going on before we can, create a sane, civilized world.